The child, if still alive, must have run away. Chris Titan had proposed to the king to go and find Jay. On the other side, there was a rustling sound, and a familiar face appeared. Blonde hair, green eyes like a summer field, that was definitely Jay. Finally, Chris Titan had found him. Instead of running away, Jay was happy to see Chris Titan. Chris Titan was confused for a moment and asked, "Why didn't you leave, Jay?" Jay smiled, tapped his head, and thought, "Imagine how I could escape from a place filled with monsters like this on my own. Even if I were lucky enough to escape this mountain, what if they hunted me down afterward?" Chris Titan wasn't convinced. He took off his coat and draped it over Jay, saying, "No, you still find a way." Jay was a little taken aback, then spoke honestly, "You're right. Suddenly, I thought, what would happen to Jescar if I disappeared? What would happen to the slaves in Vincenzo if they couldn't find me? What will happen to Mom and Dad?" That said, you didn't run away because of your parents, Chris Titan. When I have enough strength to stand confidently on my own, I will leave without hesitation, because that's who I've always been. Let's go, I'm tired. Both of them returned to their campsite. "Christian, you've been through a lot. Jay, you hurt anywhere?" "My ankle is sore, but there don't seem to be any serious injuries." "It's all thanks to Christian, and especially thanks to the wizard who used magic before I fell into the abyss." Seeing Jay, Chirac quickly strides over to him. However, he just stares without saying a word. Seeing this, Jay walks away. Then Chirac followed quietly. "Chirac, what do you want to say to me?" Jay asked. Chirac hesitated and replied, "What are you talking about?" "I don't have anything to say to you," Jay responded, "tell me what's on your mind." Chirac, still hesitant, grabbed Jay's sleeve and said, "My grandfather said you're a suspicious character, but I believe there's a reason His Majesty holds you in such high regard. You're not like everyone else," and it seems Chirac paid attention to what Jay said at the banquet, how to become like Jay. "But that's not possible, Jay. You might be a reincarnated person, but even if I were to be reincarnated, I would still be me." Jay pointed directly at Chirac and continued, "Chirac, you have to start by acknowledging yourself. I have one piece of advice for you. Chirac, give up the throne. I gave you 3 choices, but the first and second options are impossible. So, relinquish the crown so that your mother and your grandfather cannot exploit you for their greed for." Jay's words reflected the reason for His Majesty's actions. Chirac, who had previously admired the emperor, and was shocked to see the emperor genuinely wanted to cast me aside. This was the reason for Chirac's rapid transformation in such a short time. A few days ago, he was a rebellious child, but now he was someone who listened to advice. In the future, he could become even more. But that wasn't for Chirac at this moment. Leaving Chirac standing there, Jay resolved not to interfere in Chirac's affairs anymore. Never again. Jay walked straight to Jescar's tent, his whole body damp with sweat from walking all day. Jay, exhausted, sat down in a chair. Everyone looked at Jay in surprise. At first, he didn't understand what was happening. Then he realized that he had casually sat down in the chair next to Jescar. Jay suddenly jumped up, feeling bewildered, and exclaimed, "Am I going crazy? Who told me to sit here? Have I become the Emperor's concubine, Levnode?" Jescar detected the scent of sweat on Jay and decided to lead him to a bathing spring. Jay felt comfortable after immersing himself in the water. Except for having to bathe with Jescar, and falling into a stream and almost dying. "I thought I would feel disgusted when I saw water, but it wasn't that bad." Jescar asked, "Was it very dangerous up there?" "You saw the height. Fortunately, I wasn't injured. But you know, death and rebirth." The full moon emerged from behind the clouds, and its light reflected on the water's surface, creating a beautiful scene. Jay was lost in the beauty of the surroundings when he suddenly heard Jescar's command, "Come back here, Jay." The water gets deeper. Jay, feeling angry, responded, "That's not your concern. This place is safe." Jescar tightened his grip and issued a command, "Come back here immediately." Jay was now furious and retorted, "Don't give me orders. Someday, I will escape from El Pasher, and this situation will become evident." Jescar squeezed even tighter, then pulled Jay close and forcibly kissed him. Afterward, he passionately explored Jay's body, first from behind and then from the front. Jay realized this wasn't the pleasure he desired, as it didn't begin with his consent. It only had meaning when he acknowledged it himself. Don't manipulate me on your own, Jay protested. In anger, Jay pushed Jescar away and shouted, "Stop, I said stop." He let go of Jay, and Jay's scream was so loud that it reached the knights guarding from a distance. Unfazed, Jescar handed Jay a robe to cover his exposed body in front of the knights. This action only further enraged Jay, caring as if I were his concubine. For me, this action made me even more humiliated. Jay threw down his cloak and Jescar reached out and squeezed Jay's neck with one hand. Can you read other people's thoughts? Look at that dissatisfied face. Jay was angry and Jescar was equally angry. Please remember this. Don't ever think about escaping from me. Every strand of your hair also belongs to me. Jay grabbed Jescar's arm so hard that it bled, then screamed. I don't belong to anyone, I don't let anyone arbitrarily manipulate me. Jescar laughed mockingly, is that so? Is it possible? As if being doused with cold water, Jay was stunned. That's right, in this form. Jay didn't even have enough strength to throw away the hand that was strangling him. Jescar, release your hand and leave first. Jay realized what he could do was do nothing. I thought the monster hunt had come to an end. The sudden appearance of the bloodworms changed the situation. Bloodworms are classified as dangerous monsters due to their sudden appearance and unexpected attacks. Suddenly, Jescar kissed Jay fiercely. After returning from the dead, Jescar always took care of his safety. We must now participate in exterminating bloodworms, Jescar advised. The situation is dangerous, don't leave Chris Titan and Count Rumford's bloodworm corpses lying around. Seeing Jay planning to go somewhere, Chris Titan asked, where are you going? Bloodworms don't like the land soaked in the blood of their own kind, even though it's a bit disgusting, but I think it's safer to wait in a place with many corpses. Without waiting for consent, Jay just kept walking, they didn't stop him. Stopped because the words were correct. Seeing Jay staring at his magic stone, Earl Rumford asked, you really care about magic stones? Jay smiled, I won't deny, what are you planning to do? What about the magic stone? No, what really puzzles me is your Majesty's intentions. Why did you forbid you from touching the magic stone? Jay asked, Christian, what do you think? Chris Titan mused, then said, I had been thinking about it since the incident at the magic tower. You know how to use magic. Isn't that why His Majesty forbade you from using magic stones? Jay laughs. Does it matter that I'm a magician? People don't answer. Jay explains more. His Majesty praised me for having the qualities to become a sword master. He also taught me how to practice swordsmanship. But why are you so wary of magic? Jay observed Chris Titan's reaction and had no answer. Anyway, it doesn't matter anymore. Jay felt the vibration under his feet. The guards are alert. What is this? Bloodworm. Dunpil shouted loudly. Are not. It's much bigger. For bloodworms, the corpses of their fellow creatures are what make them stay away from them. However, for that species, dead bloodworms are irresistible prey. In a moment, the ground collapsed and then rose again. Something swallowed the bloodworm's body with just one bite. Someone screamed. It's a dragon worm. Why is it? Dragon worms are so powerful that they are classified as a subspecies of dragons. A legendary creature. Jay smiled with satisfaction, finally appearing. While wandering in the forest after escaping the valley, Jay witnessed a dragon worm devouring bloodworms, then disappearing into the ground. At that time, Jay thought about taking advantage of this monster to get magic stones. While Jescar deals with the bloodworms, Jay will use their corpses as bait to lure the dragon worms. When the knights let their guard down because they are busy dealing with dragonworm, Jay will take advantage of it to get magic stones. Jay, are you okay? Chris Titan rushed to protect Jay with a worried face. After hesitating for a moment, Jay shouted, Chris Titan behind him. The dragonworm crawled out of the ground and attacked Chris Titan from behind. Everyone backed away. Dunpil screamed and threw the sword deeply into the monster's body. Even though it's not as good as Jescar, it's still an aura sword. Chris Titan pushed back about a meter, was able to temporarily stop the movement of the dragonworm. Everyone be careful, you must destroy it before it releases acid. Is magic still not working? Wait a minute, it's almost there. Count Rumford frowned. concentrated his mind and used amplification magic. A moment later, a giant fireball created by Count Rumford hit the monster right eye. Half of its head was shattered, but its acid breath had not dissipated. The knights and Earl Rumford were both capable of fighting. Jay muttering, "Don't disappoint me, dragon worm." The monster was still moving vigorously. It held its breath, preparing to spit out acid. Screams from all directions. Count Rumford's defensive magic. Count Rumford tried to create a magic shield to protect everyone in there. He shouted, "I will stop it, everyone get out of the way, Jay has been watching all this time." In general, magicians cannot move their bodies when using magic, because they have to concentrate. Mages will undergo intense training to be able to perform 3 tasks at the same time. Count Rumford's recitation of the 3rd level spell while moving, it could be said that he was almost able to recite the 4th level spell. Earl Rumford tried very hard to save the soldiers' lives at the cost of his own life. Great posture. Jay reached out to take Earl Rumford's magic stone. In Jay's hand, the magic stone vibrated. He absorbed magic power immediately. In the blink of an eye, a huge beam of blue light shined straight to the monster's head. Everything shook. The monster was just a corpse. Jay broke the staff and only held the magic stone in his hand. Finally having it, Jay burst out laughing happily. Jescar hurriedly ran to him. Jay used magic to break the chains on his legs. Jescar ordered to put down the magic stone. Right now, Jay was furious. "Don't give me orders." Jescar drew his sword and pointed it at Jay, taking the magic stone back from him. Now, unlike the other mages, Jay was a 4th level mage. Can gather the ultimate power of magic in a short time. Normal magic can penetrate armor, break wooden pillars, and break rocks. Once you can recite the 4-layer spell, turning the nearby forest into ash is a trivial matter. Unbelievable, it's actually a 4-layer spell. Stop me? Try it once. Jay throws a magical tornado straight at Jescar. Jescar can easily dodge, but if he does, the knights behind him will die. Jescar gathered strength into his hands and gripped his sword tightly. Jay's aura sword emitted a powerful light. The magic that Jay had created was broken by that sword. 2 terrifying streams of power collided and exploded. Truly a monster. But Jay doesn't care. He headed towards where the magicians were gathering. Don't panic. It is not possible to cast spells continuously while moving. However, now magicians can witness that exception with their own eyes. Jay moved quickly right in front of them, then knocked down the magician and calmly took away the magic stone in his surprise. The leg shackles completely shattered. Jay turned to confront Jescar, a knight who attacked Jay from behind. But magical light flew behind, pierced many knights at the same time. Jay bent down and picked up a sword. Jay's actions went beyond the limit. Jescar screams, "Jay!" Jay still doesn't stop. "If you think you can look down on me, you're wrong." Jay shouted. "Now I will teach you a lesson. Don't you know that these things have no effect on sword masters?" Jescar easily cuts through Jay's attack. Jay raised his sword and directly blocked Jescar's attack. He thought he could defeat the sword master in close combat. It's true that Jay can't hold on any longer like this. He smiled. In the blink of an eye, Jay disappeared in front of Jescar, then suddenly appeared behind him. A ball of fire condensed on his palm. Jay replied, "With your level, of course I can." Jescar was surprised and looked back. Before Jescar could react, a fireball exploded on his back. Jescar leaned to avoid it but was still burned by the aftershock of the exploding ball. Jay gritted his teeth, a child with a leisurely life hunting monsters. The wind rose, magical vortexes fell from above at the same time. Jescar raised his sword to defend. Having fought on dozens of battlefields, Jay has never seen a soulless person fly away from his attack. Jescar realized that the aura sword was no longer able to defend. Seizing the opportunity, Jay will deliver the final decisive blow. It was over. At that moment Chirac rushed in behind Jescar so suddenly, Jescar decided not to dodge but added more power to the sword. Before activating the magic, Jay hesitated. In a short moment, Chris Titan rushed towards Jay, threw a strong kick into Jay's stomach, and he was thrown 4 to 5 meters away. With this weak body, Chris Titan's strong kick made Jay's eyes dizzy and gone dark, to the point of unconsciousness. After a fierce battle, Jescar stood panting and staring at the magic stone he took back from Jay. Dunpil spoke up, causing Jescar to wake up. Your Majesty, please order to handle it. Jay committed a felony for attempting to attack and assassinate the emperor. Furthermore, dozens of people were injured and there was heavy damage. That is the clear truth and everyone witnesses it. Put him in jail. By sunset, everything was arranged, but the atmosphere was extremely heavy. Dunpil saw Christitan sitting quietly with a stiff face. Dunpil tried to smile awkwardly and then patted Christitan's shoulder. This person who saved His Majesty's life will be received another medal. Just what we have to do. Dunpil muttering, what will happen to Jay? Christitan shouted, he tried to assassinate His Majesty, he must be beheaded immediately. Do you really think so? Dunpil asked, with Jay's ability he could seriously injure His Majesty, but he stopped, you also saw it, so do you want to stand on Jay's side? Don't distort the truth. Just in time for Earl Rumford's arrival, I have something to say about Jay. No, about the criminal who tried to assassinate your Majesty. Christitan is tired, Count, I don't want to talk about this right now. Earl Rumford still didn't stop, you guys saw it clearly, right? He read 4-layer magic, not 3. Could it happen? Impossible, not only that, he also recited the 4-layer spell while fighting with a sword. There is only one person in the history of the continent who can do, Levnod van Strass. I heard that the Crown Prince's appearance resembles that criminal, maybe it has something to do with it. A small piece of memory suddenly arose in Christitan's head, he muttered, Levnod van Strass. Jay groaned in extreme pain. The ribs were all broken. It's better to be unconscious than to suffer like this. Jay wondered why he would do such a stupid thing. In reality, Jay knew the reason and just didn't want to admit it. He was shaken. In the current situation, if the emperor dies, El Pasher's position will decline, so it is unknown that war will take place. Also, the image of Jescar not backing down to protect Chirac made Jay's heart flutter. He came to kill Jescar, but his heart shook. Jay angrily punched the ground, things like that are none of his business. Definitely don't hesitate when you have to take action. It's funny that I said this myself. Should have quickly killed Jescar when he got the magic stone. It was my chance to escape the slavery and humiliation of being trampled on. Now there's only one last chance left. Jay's whole body was sore and painful as he opened his eyes to look at the person who had just arrived. Jescar asked, staring at Jay's face. Who are you? Jay smiled, his last chance was here. The words I say don't mean anything. The fact that Jay was reincarnated as Crown Prince Levnod sounds like the nonsense of a madman. Therefore, the day he arrived at the royal citadel, Jay took a gamble. Because Jescar had stared at Jay's face many times. Jay was forgiven for his arrogant actions towards the emperor. Jescar could push Jay into the mud. But at times like that, he gave up. Because Jescar saw the image of Prince Levnod in the form of a lowly slave. If at this last minute Jescar recognized Jay, Jay's game would have been successful. Jescar's lips gradually opened. Levnod van Strass. Jay swallowed hard when he heard his name come out of Jescar's mouth for the first time, then Jescar spoke again. You are his son. Although that's realistic speculation in the current situation. Jay knew that. But Jay laughed bitterly, then shouted angrily. Don't talk ridiculously, who is whose child? After more than 10 years of effort, I was able to become a level 4 mage. But just because he's a boy, can he recite the 4-layer spell? Do you think that makes sense? Jescar grabbed Jay's neck? Are you too similar to him if you're just a boy? His face, personality, drinking style? What is the end result? Who made you like this? Did Strass create you and prepare for Levnod's return? But why are you at El Pasher just to meet me? Jay's voice trembled. What? Jay angrily pushed Jescar away. Why, didn't you force me to come here? I, who are called a genius every day. I vomited so much blood before I successfully recited the 4-layer spell. Then who are you? Who are you anyway? Say it. Jay was stunned. What else? I said it all directly. Does he really not know? Failed? Jescar is inherently a rational person. He has completely eliminated emotions. Only accept opinions based on evidence. Wake up, Jay, the game has failed, go away, my plan to expel the Queen's side is failed because of your chaos. This is a situation where I cannot tolerate you anymore. So if you want to live, answer quickly. After the army returned, rumors about Jay spread more and more. Jay was a level 4 magician and an assassin sent by Strass. Although the evidence was all fake, the assassination of the emperor was true. This gave strength to the Queen's faction. Duke Marxy did not hesitate to say, "Your Majesty, an vile man from Strass has blinded you, and then intends to harm you. This is a disaster, Your Majesty, do you still want to protect that slave now?" Unexcited Jescar replied with a cold expression. Duke Marxy must first find out who was behind him. You want to kill him without asking any questions? Duke Marxy laughed loudly. That's right. Even by skinning or bone-breaking that guy, we still have to find the person behind it. I hope he doesn't lose his life before telling the truth. Your Majesty, please be careful. Then he went to the Queen's palace. I've heard it. During this time, he still seemed so calm. It's true that the emperor is different. The Queen of Brussels slammed her hand on the table and shouted. How is that slave now? I want to personally interrogate that arrogant bastard. Still being interrogated, but His Majesty forbids anyone from coming to see him anyway, in the end he will die. If Your Majesty tries to protect him until the end, that is also a good thing. Who can trust and follow an emperor who is so infatuated with his concubine that he cannot distinguish between right and wrong? The Queen gritted her teeth. It was divine punishment. He tried to wipe out our family, the people who sacrificed and were loyal to him, now he is paying the price for it. Thinking about what you did to our Chirac, I'm heartbroken and cry. Between the laughter of two people. Chirac was silent for a moment, then spoke. Your Majesty did not avoid my attack to protect me. Furthermore, Jay stopped even though he could have delivered the decisive blow. Obviously I saw. Duke Marxy angrily told Chirac, why His Highness said that. That slave tried to assassinate Your Majesty, he picked up a sword and attacked Your Majesty, that's the truth. Because His Highness Chirac is so good-hearted, even though His Majesty treats him cruelly, he still respects his father. Jescar went down the stairs leading to the dungeon. The prison guard was startled awake. Your Majesty. Why did you come here without an escort? Jescar coldly asked briefly. How's the result? He is not an ordinary person. We are also careful because if we make a mistake, it could cost him his life. Jay groaned weakly, tied to the chair, his whole body covered in bruises from being tortured for many days. At Jay's feet, traces of torture by dirty hands were still there, wet and dirty mixed with blood. Jescar was mad, the soldier faltered in his explanation. This is because he refused to open his mouth. So that was why you lay hands on him? Jescar drew his sword and chopped off the prison guard's head in an instant. Fresh blood splashed. Jay opened his eyes and looked forward, trembling as he said, Jescar. Jescar stood there with an angry face and a bloody sword. The prison guard trembled with fear. Jescar approached and grabbed Jay's neck tightly. Do you want to die? Jay looked straight at Jescar and sneered with all his remaining strength. Get out. But do you think I will obediently live by your side for the rest of my life? Jescar grabbed Jay's hair and pulled Jay's face up. I know what you fear most is humiliation. Can you live with the mark of a sex slave on your body? Jay was silent and looked at the ground. Jescar ordered the soldier to bring the red-hot iron rod. Tormented by wounds both new and old all over his body. Painful, Jay couldn't sleep and has nightmares. He was haunted by the moment the hot iron pressed against his skin. Jay startled awake. Then I found myself lying in bed. In Jescar's room, Jay breathed a sigh of relief. Jescar laughed contemptuously. What do you feel relieved about? Do you think you have escaped death now? Jay asked sarcastically. Should I say no? So why didn't you lock me in prison and bring me here? Jescar roughly grabbed Jay's arm and raised his voice. Don't provoke me. The reason I brought you here. Jay feeling extremely painful. He groaned, don't touch me. Jescar standing stunned, watching Jay painfully hugging himself, silent for a moment, Jescar said, okay, I will interrogate every slave in Vincenzo City. Jay opened his eyes wide in surprise, then reassured himself that those people were not related to him. Jay said tiredly, "It's up to you." Jescar turned away and Jay shouted, "Wait." Jay helplessly crawled on the floor, raising his shaking hands. Jay stammered, "Parents, they don't know anything, really, let me." However, Jay realized he couldn't do anything now, his tears flowed profusely. What can I say to Jescar to ease this situation? Nothing, I have become an extremely weak person. I thought I could abandon my parents or anything without mercy. But why is it like this? Why can't I give up those dirty slaves? Jay grabbed Jescar's shirt and begged, "Please forgive my parents, I will do anything." Jay's usually proud face became dirty with tears and snot. Jay knelt on the ground. With trembling hands, he unbuttoned Jescar's pants. Jescar coldly wanted to push Jay away, but he still did not give up. Try to undo one button at a time. Finally, Jescar violently pushed Jay away, then turned and left, leaving miserable Jay sitting on the cold ground. Jescar angrily opened the door in the hall and stormed out. Dunpil said, "Your Majesty, you have probably heard enough, but please listen to me, take Jay back to prison. If we continue to cover criminals without reason, there will be no turning back." Jescar replied mechanically, "I'm not covering up, it's only necessary for the interrogation." Dunpil shouted in despair, "Your Majesty, stop making the excuse that it's for interrogation. How long do you think you can keep Jay with that excuse? The only way now is to execute that slave." Jescar put his sword on Dunpil's neck in warning. "Dunpil, be careful what you say, I won't forgive you a second time." Dunpil mutters, "God, I can't believe it. If this continues." Chris Titan coldly asked, "Weren't you the one who defended Jay first?" Chris Titan, "I'm simply stating the truth. Jay is not an assassin to assassinate the Emperor or a spy for Strass. However, Jay attacked His Majesty in front of the knights. You also saw it with your own eyes. It would be too dangerous to let Jay live. Before Duke Marxy was more difficult to suppress. Jay must be executed to end this." Dunpil take Chris Titan by the shoulders. "Chris Titan, please, Jay is strong and intelligent, that mystery dazzles you and His Majesty, but open your eyes and see. What will happen if Duke Marxy comes to power? Do you think it will end with the decline of your family and mine? Can a country exist normally when these ones rule it? El Pasher's fate is hanging in the balance here." Chris Titan suddenly swung his fist, causing Dunpil to fall to the ground. "Are you planning to overpower me with that ability?" Chris Titan coldly turned away. Dunpil shouted, "Jay belongs to His Majesty." Chris Titan stood motionless, his eyes shining blue in shock. Then he said, "What does that mean? If that's all you want to say, then let's go first." Dunpil covered his face in pain and muttered, "Haven't I always been by your side? But why don't you listen to me?" Chris Titan in the dim light of bedroom. Jescar sat quietly holding Jay's hand for a long time. Jay laid unconscious on the bed, breathing heavily. In a daze, Jay muttered something. Jescar leaned closer, trying to hear Jay say he wanted a drink. Jescar wondering how many days it's been, when his Jay had been like this. Jescar called the servant to bring him a cup of hot water and a towel. Jescar helped Jay sit up and gave him water to drink. Jay drank unconsciously, drinking continuously in one long gulp. Immediately after that, Jay coughed violently and vomited all the water he drank. Jay had trouble breathing and his neck burned. He clung tightly to the bedsheet and writhed in pain. At this rate, Jay would probably die without the death penalty. Jescar grabbed Jay's hand. Jay felt something in his hand. It was a piece of magic stone. "Jescar, this is for you." Jay is so weak that he cannot quickly absorb magic stones. Jay then slowly recited the spell. The stone vibrated and made a sound. A beam of light from the magic stone mixed into Jay's body and gradually healed his wound. However, because the body was already weak, it was now exhausted. So he could only repeat the recovery magic after a period of rest. And the deep wounds on his body could not heal. Jay took a deep breath. The magic stone in his hand fell out. He fainted and fell asleep. Jay had to be treated for a long time. He spent most of his time sleeping. Jescar knows Jay wouldn't run away anymore, because he was afraid that his parents would be punished. Jay tied to the chains of his own making and remaining helplessly by his side. Jescar felt like a coward. After Jay recovered a bit, important work was delayed for more than a month. Now it was gradually being resolved by Jescar. However, he no longer had the will to do anything else. But only working mechanically, the Queen's faction became increasingly powerful. Taking advantage of Jescar's absence to intervene in state affairs, Duke Marxi arbitrarily appointed relatives and close associates to important positions. The Queen used the state's money for her personal purposes. As time passed, the Queen's faction became stronger and stronger. Jescar's position was threatened. But Jescar doesn't care. Just like that, the fourth monster hunt of the year had come. El Pasher was in chaos. Many nobles wanted to stop the hunt, but Jescar decided to continue. Jay was tired and panting, his legs were paralyzed and weak. He called Jescar with all his might. Jay still hasn't recovered. Such hunting is very dangerous. But Jescar had no other choice. If he were to stay, the Queen would kill him. Jescar left him to Christitan's care. Christitan picked Jay up and was surprised because Jay was so light. He lost a lot of weight. Jay was hot and breathing heavily. Then fell asleep in Christitan's arms. Dunpil approached. The captain must be very tired. Let me hold him for a moment. Christitan flatly refused. Although the fighting spirit is not as high as before. But the hunt still went smoothly. However, sometimes Jescar still loses concentration. Seizing the opportunity, an orc rushed up and used an axe to slash at Jescar's chest, making everyone extremely scared. Because it was the first time they saw His Majesty shed blood before a monster. After calming down, Jescar easily killed the monster. He laughed at himself, because he didn't expect that one day he would be attacked so easily. Someone shouted, "Your Majesty is injured. Is there any magician who knows how to cast healing spells?" All eyes turned to Jay. The magician gave the magic stone to Jay. He approached Jescar. Jay was in an unstable state, slowly chanting the spell. The magic stone vibrated and emitted light. Jescar's wound gradually closed and fully recovered. Jay turned away when Jescar suddenly grabbed his hand. "Your current condition is not good enough to be able to treat others." Jay bursted out laughing. "Because I want to clear my debt. If I want to exchange for the safety of my parents. What about this? Is it still too much?" Jay threw the magic stone on the ground and just left. Christitan worried, "Jay, you look so bad." Jay mumbled, "I'm fine." Suddenly, blood flowed from Jay's nose, then he staggered and was about to collapse. Christitan hastily hugged Jay. He had trouble breathing and then passed out. Christitan called everyone around for help, but no one wanted to treat a sinner. When the sun set, the army stopped and set up camp to rest. Jay had a high fever and was lying unconscious. Chirac suddenly appeared. Christitan was worried that the crown prince will again plot to harm Jay. Chirac asked Christitan, "Do you feel sorry for this slave? If so, I will help him escape from here." Then, behind Chirac, mysterious men dressed in black appeared. "These people will take Jay away, you just have to pretend you don't know." Christitan hugged Jay tightly and asked, "What do you mean?" "If that guy disappears, His Majesty will definitely be disturbed. That way, he won't think about eliminating me, right?" Looking at the slave who was once arrogant and even despised the crown prince, now lying barely alive, Chirac continued. "Moreover, this is also a great opportunity for me to get rid of someone I hate so much like him. For the first time, I will do what I want with my own strength. Christitan, give Jay to these people." The men approached simultaneously. Christitan did not want to hand Jay over to those shady people. He hugged Jay. "I will take Jay away." Chirac opened his eyes wide in surprise, but because of the urgency of the situation, he could not talk for long. "Then go, within an hour at most. I will make sure His Majesty does not discover your absence. Tell him never to come back here again." Chirac threw a bag containing a few magic stones to Christitan. Then, Christitan hugged Jay and ran at full speed without looking back. When the two of them had gone quite a distance, Jay woke up and asked, "Where are we?" Christitan take Jay's hand, "You are free. However, it's still not absolutely safe. If we don't move a little further, what do you say? How about Jescar?" "What are you doing, Christian?" Jay trembled and shed tears. "We must return immediately." If I run away, my parents will be executed. No, maybe even the dead is better than alive. Having to return to Jescar, Chris Titan frowned, shouted angrily, "What? Is that why you've been so resigned all this time? Didn't you say you could leave your parents at any time?" Jay helplessly shook Chris Titan's hand away, tears welling up in his eyes. "Let me go, damn it. They deserve it." There was a time when Jay missed his beautiful hometown. The bloody flower background is obtained after killing all the brothers. It is a beautiful homeland that Jay protects with his own hands. But Jay found happiness in the poorest place of slavery. It made Jay completely forget the bitter memory of the poison cup of tea. Just remember the lovely people. Jay exhausted his strength and fainted. Chris Titan initially planned to leave here before dawn. But the plan failed. Chris Titan returned to Jay's place after wandering around collecting dry firewood. Chris Titan overwhelmed with the scene before his eyes. Jay stood proudly in the morning sunlight and then slowly turned around. Blue Eyes saw Chris Titan smile. "There you are, do you have any magic stones with you? Does that mean you want to leave? It seems like I've been too emotional lately. Do I look ugly? Where are you going?" "Where to go?" Jay exhaled a breath and spoke. "Let's go to Strass." Chris Titan was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you want to return to your homeland, Levnod van Strass?" Jay was surprised, but he didn't ask why Chris Titan mentioned that name. Jay smiled slightly. "Let's see, my hometown." Jay raised his head and took a deep breath. In the morning sunlight, Jay's hair shined. Chris Titan immersed himself in this incomparably beautiful scene. Jay said, "Let's go." Chris Titan Jay enjoyed watching the scenery under the mountain. He happily commented, "Looks peaceful, right?" Chris Titan, who just killed a monster, blood splattering, "Is it peaceful?" Fertile fields, well-maintained roads. Although there are many monsters, looking at the royal family's hunting cycle, it seems that this policy is well established. When I was alive, this country was not like that. In just a few years El Pasher has become very livable. Chris Titan responded with pride, "Of course." Seeing that, Jay teased, "But now it's over, because Jescar has continuously created conditions for the Queen's faction. The consequences will soon affect the people." He destroyed the achievement that he himself had built. Jay endured the pain and tried to stand up. Chris Titan immediately came to help Jay. Even though he tried not to show his body's weak condition, Chris Titan still realized, "Jay, your body, there's no other way, I'll get better if I rest a little." Actually, with his current body condition, Jay could collapse at any time. "Jay, you're going the wrong way. When you get to Strass, you don't need to go down to the village, you have to go south." The pursuers suspected that I would return to Strass, so they probably camped at the south gate. No need to move according to their predictions. Half of the continent is Strass. As long as you don't go north, you will reach Strass one day. Chris Titan no longer protested, following Jay. A few days later, the two arrived in town. Looking from the mountain, it was unclear. This village was busier than Jay thought, thanks to which he was able to buy hair dye, to heighten the two people's characteristic blonde and platinum hair color. Chris Titan had also grown a bushy beard. Both were now nothing more than beggars. Even though Jay dyed his hair. But is it okay to walk around on the road like this? Don't worry, no one actually notices. Jay saw ahead, people gathered in unusually large numbers. Jay was curious and pushed his way inside. Chris Titan was worried. "Jay, we should better avoid crowded places." Chris Titan was stunned when he saw the content on the advertisement, a portrait of both of them, and a special reward. One finger 500,000 gold, 1 foot 1 million gold, but must be captured alive. Chris Titan stood there like a nail, staring at the notice. His face gradually turned pale. After leaving the market, the two of them stopped to rest for a while. "After seeing the wanted notice, you didn't seem to be in a good mood." "Of course, he's not someone who would act so cruelly. But this, why do you care about Jescar's cruelty after betraying him, and now want to play the role of his knight?" Chris Titan hesitated, then couldn't say anything more and bowed his head. Jay also didn't want to bother Chris Titan anymore, because this was the only person helping him in his current situation. "The arrest warrant required me to be captured alive. So we still have a chance to be safe even when captured, we was not immediately killed. Jay began to seriously ask about Stras's current situation after Crown Prince Levnod, who received absolute support, was murdered. The anger of the people was sky high. The 11th Prince Edric was confirmed to be the one plotting to kill the Crown Prince. The motive and circumstances were so clear that execution was quickly determined. But Emperor Stras actively protected Prince Edric, and eventually Grand Duke Calloway was convicted as the culprit. But many people still know that Calloway was just a sacrificed lamb. The culprit is someone else. El Pasher and Stras. A while ago there was a war. If the Crown Prince and the 11th Prince die together, the royal bloodline will end. It is difficult to predict what the future will be like. As an emperor, he would have to think about the future of the country. Rather than avenging Levnod, Chris Titan stopped talking and asked Jay, "What is the truth? Didn't the 11th Prince kill you?" "Well, maybe I was killed by Eddie." Chris Titan was surprised by the name Jay called the 11th Prince. "That was a while ago, so how has Stras been lately?" "Not really good. After ascending the throne, the current emperor runs a violent dynasty. There is not a day when blood is not shed, so it is difficult for the country to be at peace." Jay's surprise, violent reign. That gentle kid? Strangely, the Emperor Edric we know is very far from gentle. Jay laughed loudly, meaning that was his true nature. For now, without worrying too much about Stras, Jay decided to help Jescar correct El Pasher. Jay meant that he would help His Majesty. "Didn't you say that it's not something you care about? It's just that we have thought carefully. If we are negligent, it will no longer be a problem for Jescar alone, but also a problem for the whole country." "Did you just think about it?" Jay did not answer. He looked at the fountain. On top of the fountain was a beautifully carved stone dragon statue. "I have never seen a dragon. That luck does not come to me yet." "The way you spoke was so unique, it seemed like you had seen everything except dragons." Jay startled. Chris Titan felt like he was stuck inside his stomach. Suddenly, a man rushed forward and hit Jay hard on the shoulder, causing him to fall to the ground. Chris Titan rushed to help Jay up. He grimaced, "It was so unlucky." Jay's robe fell open, revealing a mark on his neck. The man pointed at it and shouted, "Wait, this is a hot iron mark." A young man also came along. "Really, Jake, here is a trace of a sex slave. A child who has just weaned has already sunk to the bottom of society." Chris Titan was angry. It was easy to defeat these two guys, but because he didn't want to attract attention, Jay held Chris Titan's hand to signal him to calm down. "Why are slaves loitering like beggars in this place? Who is your master? Why didn't you say anything? I don't know if they are running away." The young man whispered to him. "Jake, no news of escaped slaves. These news usually reach our ears right away." He thought for a moment, then grabbed Jay's chin, showed interest. "Take this kid with you. This guy looks very valuable." The two guys laughed happily. "Worried about not having items for the upcoming auction. This is a God-given opportunity for us. We are very lucky." But after seeing the unusual injuries on Jay's body, because they couldn't sell it right away, they decided to take Jay to see a healer to see his body condition. Chris Titan wondered and asked Jay, "What were you thinking?" "You just need to follow." Jake shouted. "What's up? What are you two whispering about?" "I'm asking my brother to carry me." Jay clung to Chris Titan's back looking like a fragile child. During the meeting of the ministers, Duke Marxy raised his voice. The northern bandits continued to rampage, and even more arrogantly demanded to be bought and sold. "Jescar order, it's useless, just tell them we allow trading." The nobles began to gossip. This has been a problem for many years. El Pasher conquered all the surrounding countries, large and small, in the Great War 10 years ago. However, the northern ice regions and small islands were not completely occupied. Because El Pasher was not interested in snow-covered Northland all year round. However, the rare fish from the glacier was an attractive trade item for El Pasher. The ethnic minorities in Northland need abundant grain from El Pasher, so the two sides maintain a friendly relationship. However, trading is not allowed. Because with this, Northland becomes an independent country recognized by El Pasher, which could cause other groups to rebel and demand autonomy. Duke Marxy's faction did not allow trading, and the royal faction wanted to allow it, so they clashed for many years. Now Jescar's sudden order to allow trading has caused Duke Marxie's faction to protest furiously. The nobles who once supported Jescar are now unable to speak up because of His Majesty's hasty and reckless decision. Jescar angrily slammed his hand on the table. I allowed trading. If you are dissatisfied, Duke Marxie should lead his army to suppress Northland. If so, I will follow your wishes. Jescar looked down at everyone challengingly. Do you all hear clearly? I have allowed the trade, and will not tolerate any further objections. A noble was still not afraid to speak up. Your Majesty is really forced. Why did you force Duke Marxie, a civil servant, to destroy the bandits? Now, please prick up your ears and listen to the advice of Duke Marxie. Before he finished speaking, Jescar signaled that suddenly the soldiers rushed in to arrest the nobleman who was causing the noise. I said I wouldn't accept any more objections. Take him out and behead him. He screamed as the soldiers dragged him away. Your Majesty, Duke Marxie hastily spoke up. Your Majesty cannot let this happen. Please revoke the order immediately. Jescar speaks in a lower voice. Are you always this noisy? Duke Marxie and others in the palace had no weapons, except for the knights standing guard. Duke Marxie glanced at them. Looking at Jescar's attitude, Duke Marxie obediently remained silent. Everyone could only bow their heads. Jescar coldly said, next problem. After Jescar ruthlessly executed the dissatisfied nobleman, the ranks of disgruntled vassals grew, all waiting for an opportunity to challenge the monarchy's authority. Jescar asked, have you found them yet? He looked at the person in charge of searching for Christitan and Jay. The man shook his head and stammered, we've heard reports from all over, but we haven't received any reliable information. Jescar cast a chilling gaze at the man and said in a menacing tone, so, you still haven't found them? Isn't it because you've been working on this for too long? No, Your Majesty, we're doing our best, the man hastily explained. But before he could finish his sentence, Jescar decapitated him. No one had time to react, the head flew off, splattering blood all over the floor. Useless incompetence, clean this up, Jescar ordered and turned to leave. He heard Chirac's cry of anguish. Seeing the headless body, Chirac, though terrified, still managed to speak. Your Majesty, I have an important matter to discuss with you. Please spare me some time. Jescar remained silent and dismissed Chirac's words. Chirac was frustrated and shouted, King, what are you doing? At this point, Jescar spoke up, saying, Chirac, I know that you helped them escape. Chirac, trembling, gathered the courage to continue, Your Majesty, do you have any evidence? How did you know about it? Jescar asked suddenly, how old are you this year? Chirac hesitated but eventually replied, I am 15 years old, just a child. Jescar mocked, a child? That means you think you can resolve everything just because you're still young. Despite being ridiculed, Chirac didn't back down. He continued to speak with determination, so, Your Majesty, are you wasting your time searching for a runaway slave? I may be young, but I know this isn't the right way, Your Majesty. Jescar, growing increasingly furious, raised his voice, do you realize how many opportunities I've given you? Yet you still act recklessly like this. Jescar had lost his composure, charging aggressively towards Chirac. Startled, Chirac recoiled. Inside the palace chamber, many had already perished due to provoking the emperor. Chirac had never thought he would be one of them. Two guards quickly stood in front of Chirac, saying, Your Majesty, please wait, but before they could finish, Jescar's sword gleamed and took the lives of both men. In that moment, only Chirac remained. Chirac shed tears in anger, while Jescar raised his silver sword and slashed down. With a metallic clang, Jescar's sword was stopped. Dunpil gritted his teeth and focused his strength to block with his own sword. I dare to brandish my sword in front of Your Majesty, please spare my life. But this is not possible, Your Majesty. Chirac could no longer stand and fell to the ground in fright. Jescar finally put down his sword, and I had no intention of warning him anymore. Then turned around and left. Chirac was still trembling in fear, but when he saw his father leaving, he shouted, Your Majesty, I really have something to tell you, you must listen to me, if you ignore me like this, you will regret it. Jescar angry, but there was still no response. Chirac clenched his fist. From now on, I will never look for king again. Sometime after the two auction hunters found someone to treat Jay's injuries, he recovered quite well. He's grabbed Jay's chin and said happily, "Sure enough, it costs a little money and it will be as clean as new. It will probably be a good price." Jay stared at Hees without saying a word. Hees shouted loudly, "This guy is getting more and more arrogant. I want to correct that habit for you. But since there are distinguished guests coming today, we'll ignore it for now." He walks out the door, then turns around and points at Christian to continue speaking. "You too." After that guy left, Chris Titan asked, "Is Jay completely cured now? How long do you plan to stay here?" "I want to stay here until I fully recover. But it looks like there's going to be an auction, so we'll have to act slowly." Behind the door, the slave boy stood and called out, "Hello, Mr. Laird, Uncle Serto, come in." Peter, Jay noticed new wounds on the boy's body. "Maybe just got beaten. I heard that the slave market in our town is very famous. There were many distinguished guests coming from far away." "Yes, I've heard it too. I hope many people come and it sells quickly. Sir Arthur is very scary." The pain from the wound made the boy groan softly. Seeing this, Jay quickly ran over to ask, "The injury is serious, Peter. Why were you beaten like that?" Jay lifted up the shirt the boy was wearing. The body was skinny and covered in fresh bloody whip marks. Peter whimpered and said Sir Arthur didn't like his freckles. "I can't do anything about my freckles either." Jay turns to Chris Titan and says that guy is trash number one. "Please do something before you leave here." Just then the door to the room opened wide. Arthur shouted, "I told you not to gather loudly. Today's important guest does it." The remaining names spoke up. "Arthur, how rude are you in front of Baron Barum? Be quiet." Jay paused after hearing the name Barum. Then he peeked out the door. When Jay was involved in handling Jescar's books, Jay also knew about this. Count Barum is capable. Jay nominated Barum to the Ministry of Finance. Jescar also realized this, but since Barum belonged to the barony of Byandal, he did not want to cause any disturbance. Jake looked into the room, then smiled sinisterly. He opened the door and spoke warmly. "The Baron here has a pretty good slave. Would you like to see it? I will stay here for a few days and will slowly choose. So don't rush me anymore." "I absolutely did not mean that. Just wanted to invite you to take a look." In the room, Chris Titan worriedly said, "Jay, that Baron Barum knew me. If this keeps up, our presence here will quickly be discovered." So right away, just as the door opened, the three of them entered the room. Arthur also aggressively kicked Peter's body. Jay immediately lifted his finger and used magic to create a gust of wind that slammed the door shut. Made them extremely surprised. Chris Titan, recognizing Jay's signal, he quickly grabbed the scissors on the table, threw them at Jake's neck, and at the same time, as fast as lightning, used one hand to grab Arthur's face and smash it to the ground. Meanwhile, Jay pulled Peter and covered his mouth to keep him from screaming. Jay smiled and said he didn't expect to meet each other here. "It is coincidence." Baron Barum. Barum was extremely surprised and stammered, "Why are you here?" Jay let go of Peter, raised his finger to signal silence, and answered, "Because of someone else, I have to suffer and be humiliated, so I have to come here for free treatment." Barum shouted angrily, "In front of whom do you dare to have that attitude? Don't speak casually, that slave." Jay smiled faintly, "Are you still trying to act noble? It's you who should speak politely. I'm sick of people who are worthless, treating me like a slave." Barum was confused for a moment. Then stammered, "You are His Majesty's slave?" "No, an assassin disguised as a slave." "Why should I be polite to someone like you? Because your guesses are all wrong." Meanwhile, Arthur struggled to escape. Jay shouted loudly, "It was too loud, cut off his right hand, Christian." Without hesitation, Chris Titan followed suit. He stabbed the tip of the scissors hard into Arthur's right wrist. He screamed, then only groaned. Baron Barum turned pale and said to Chris Titan, "Mr. Chris Titan, why did you follow that guy's orders? What a pity for someone like you. After all, why did you betray your majesty?" "Because everything was so sudden." Jay approached and pulled out a chair. "I have something to ask." The emperor ruled continuously. In a bad way. Meanwhile, Marquis Byandal sided with the queen? So for you, a vassal of Marquis Byandal, this will be a great opportunity. Why are you still free to come to this place? Baram was silent for a moment, then said, in front of Marquis Byandal, I said that we should be cautious and observe the current situation. The Marquis is not satisfied with my opinion. Then send me here to buy a usable slave. In short, I'm fired. Jay asked again to be careful. I told him that your majesty is not such a broken person. So we need to be more cautious. The people your majesty killed were all low-ranking nobles and servants who followed the queen's orders. He still hasn't taken action against key figures, respected by the people, ruled in such a terrible way. However, the origin of this. Perhaps it was because the commander of the guard, the person his majesty trusted the most, suddenly betrayed him. Baram threw a disgusted look at Chris Titan. Jay had gained a lot of important information thanks to this meeting. Jay stood up and approached Baram, summarizing that he doubted the emperor's intentions and advised him to monitor the situation further. But Marquis Byandal was angry and fired you even though you were his favorite person. What does Marquis Byandal want to do with the emperor after sending you away? Perhaps the queen's faction has already made some important decision. Even though Baron Baram tried not to reveal anything? But Jay was discovered by his tension. Chris tightened loudly, no way, how dare they plot treason, Jay continued. It's also true. I don't know when I will fall under the sword of the crazy emperor. Therefore Marquis Byandal did not want to delay any longer. If you monitor whether there really is a rebellion or not, you will naturally know. Let's go, Christian, Baram stammered. Will you leave? Won't you kill me? Jay was rummaging around looking for useful things to take with him. Just said. Why? I have no grudge against you. On the contrary, there is sympathy. Because I like talented people? Jay continued smiling. If I had to say a word for talented people, the emperor is still better than the queen. Now you have come to a quiet place away from everything. So think about it. After Chris Titan released Arthur, he was pale-faced and hugged his bloody arm. Jay picked Peter up and asked, did he bully you every day? I'll handle everything, so just say, what do you want me to do with him? Do you want me to beat him? Peter shouted angrily, you bastard, kill him, it's not good for the child's psychology to let him decide to keep killing or save a life. Jay turned Peter around and smiled and said, killing him wouldn't be very good, so he'll give him a lesson he'll never forget. Jay comforted Peter and turned to look at Chris Titan one last time. Arthur's ending was the same as Jake's. Jay handed Peter over to Uncle Baram and then left with Chris Titan. Jay felt refreshed, he stretched and breathed the outdoor air after a long time. Chris Titan followed behind, intending to hold Jay's hand but let go midway. Jay noticed but didn't say anything. Chris Titan suddenly spoke up, Jay, what are you thinking? From the beginning, weren't you planning on returning to Strass right away? Jay replied, yes, I wasn't planning on returning to Strass immediately. I really appreciate your help. But that doesn't mean I will tell you everything. You are nothing to me. Chris Titan was stunned but didn't say a word, just stood there looking at Jay. Jay knew that Chris Titan had feelings for him, but even touching a finger, Chris Titan didn't dare, and never became greedy. Even though he betrayed Jescar, he always had his heart set on this emperor. Jay guessed the reason Chris Titan protected him. Jay said, from the beginning I knew you were still loyal to Jescar, so why did you lead me to escape, like you were betraying Jescar? Chris Titan just remained silent. Then Jay turned around and left. If you don't want to talk, I won't force you. If I gave an order, I'm not sure you would say it. I know Levnod Van Strass, Chris Titan said, causing Jay to pause. It's been more than 10 years since that person passed away. That person is someone we can't help but remember. That's why neither I nor your majesty can take our eyes off you. Your majesty is steadfast and consistent. If he had decided not to kill you, then he should have protected you as much as he could, even if he turned his back on everyone. But with such a half-hearted attitude, my king is not such a foolish person. Jay say, no, I asked why you ran away with me. Chris Titan tightened the hilt of his sword and continued, your majesty was only in temporary chaos. I only intend to leave you so that your majesty can regain his reason. Until then I will protect you with my sword. You will protect me. Sunset has fallen, Jay said as he looked up at the red sky. If we cannot be indifferent to things that make our hearts weak, we will have to find other ways to protect important things. But I despicably clung to Jescar's hem, begging for mercy. Jay originally thought that even if he was thrown into the sewer, this pride would never be humiliated. But that day he threw his pride down the drain. The day we hunted creatures, and finally, when I touched the magic stone. I made the worst choice instead of the best choice. I did irreversible things, then had to cry and beg. I was trapped in my emotions and did stupid things. This mistake must be resolved by both me and Jescar. El Pasher's long, cold winter is about to end. During the change of seasons, Jescar continued his carnage and violence. The imperial city was filled with blood. No one defends the emperor anymore. Dunpil tried to persuade Jescar every day, but the result was only despair. Dunpil, for some reason, both Jescar and Christitan suddenly Dunpil heard a loud noise and looked outside. Hundreds of soldiers are surrounding the palace. Dunpil smiled. It was a rebellion, but he felt that he was not surprised. Dunpil immediately ran downstairs. The royal palace was suppressed. Although Dunpil was predictable, the fact that Prince Chirac led the rebel army was extremely unbelievable. Chirac screamed, "Find your majesty first. Your majesty is not comfortable both mentally and physically, so you must accompany him carefully." "Absolutely, don't be rude," Dunpil laughed loudly. "Is the crown prince already this old?" However, the day Crown Prince Chirac gains the upper hand, this country will perish. Dunpil pulled out his sword. "No matter how bad the emperor was, no matter how the emperor has fallen, I cannot let go as I have kept my oath of loyalty. You must take 30 heads of the rebel, then even if you die, you will be worthy of your name." While Dunpil decided to rush forward, suddenly in the crowd of rebels, shouts rang out from the direction, "Enemy, enemy!" The rebels were attacked by the knights who had just appeared. Dunpil, feeling confused, he didn't understand what was going on. Suddenly a voice rang out. "Crown Prince Chirac, how dare you lead your army to rebel? Are you ready to pay the price for this? Duke Wolfengamot is entering the palace." Following him was a group of family knights. Dunpil immediately joined the Duke's army and defeated the rebels? Then ask. "What is this, Duke Wolfengamot?" "This is your majesty's order. I have secretly prepared to eliminate the traitors." Jescar ordered Duke Wolfengamot to kill his son who was guilty of a crime. Therefore, the Queen's faction was so sure of the destruction of the Wolfengamot family that they paid no attention to him. But in fact, the Duke prepared the army and carried out the Emperor's secret orders. Just at that moment, Emperor Jescar appeared, boldly entering with a halo sword in his hand. Everyone became motionless. Hadn't the Emperor gone crazy? Jescar screams, "No rebel can leave my palace alive." The momentum of the royal knights skyrocketed, quickly suppressing the rebels. Chirac was also escorted away, in a state of shock and pale face. Dunpil looked at Jescar angrily. "So you're deliberately acting so that the Queen's side will fall all at once?" Jescar laughed at Dunpil's question. He really almost went crazy because of Jay. Before leaving, Jescar loudly said that now will be the time to take responsibility for his actions. "Please bring Jay safely before me." After leaving the slave trading place, Jay headed to the neutral country of Abek located between Stras and El Pasher to shorten the time. They chose to cross the Chrome Mountains very confident in their abilities, but both of them also spent a lot of physical strength, because he encountered a group of goblins. After arriving in the village, the two found an inn to rest. Christitan placed a few coins on the table and spoke as if on command. "I'll stay here for one night, please give me the cleanest room." The shop owner jumped up happily. "Yes, please wait a moment, I will prepare right away." Seeing that Christitan was not careful to hide his identity like before, Jay smiled and said, "You are venting your anger this way, you're venting anger this way. After struggling for days in the Chrome Mountains, acting unlike yourself. I just can't bear more rudeness. Besides, Jay, you're already tired from the goblins, your body condition will get worse, so you need to rest." The room was prepared and the boss led the way for both of. "Seeing everyone in town is strange." Jay asked. "Boss, the atmosphere in town is so gloomy, is something wrong?" The boss whispered that there was news that the crown prince had rebelled and that war was about to take place. Chris Titan raised his voice in surprise. What? Jay raised his hand to stop him, calmly asked, what happened to the prince's rebellion? The emperor arrested them all that same day. But in the area that used to be Edelman's kingdom, some high-ranking officials have demanded his release. It's crazy to demand the release of the rebellious crown prince like that. The two returned to the room. Jay took off his coat and sat down on the bed, then asked. Chris Titan, Adelman is the emirate just above the neutral country Christian. Adelman is the emirate just above the neutral country of Abak? That's right, Adelman succumbed to El Pasher at the end of the War of Conquest. Now the person who was a servant of the Old Kingdom was given the title and ruled that area. Tired Jay lay down on the bed. Minister of the Old Kingdom. After all, the fact that they want Prince Shirak to regain power is just an excuse. The regime is in chaos, so they want to take this opportunity to become independent. It sounds absurd. But perhaps this bothers Jescar because this is clear evidence of how his power is being shaken? Jay was tired and just drifted off to sleep. Christian was about to pat Jay's head, then paused. He softly said, "Good night." Jay didn't know how long he slept, but when he was startled, he opened his eyes. He was startled to see a mysterious man, wearing a black hood, standing at the door. He said to Jay, "Come out."